a public live stream. Thanks, everyone.
All right, we're live, but I'm going to wait until top of the hour. Perhaps the clock is slightly off on my machine. There we go. Okay, welcome everyone to the SRE AMA. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Go straight to the doc for questions. We have one first question from Alper. Are you on the call? Yes, you are. If you could verbalize your question, appreciate it. Otherwise, I will read it for you. All right, Alper. So the question asked is, was there performance scaling testing planned for a growing number of labels, groups, subgroups, repos, issues, pages, and all other dimensions users can inflate? Short answer is not that I'm aware of. It's likely that there's consideration given to this, but I think this question is better directed to the quality team. And if you wait 30 minutes, they're up for an AMA at the half-hour mark. And then I'm staring at a blank doc. So we can open this up for questions, or I can just keep an eye on the Google Doc and we'll see what materializes. I was joking with Cassiano before the start of this call that generally interest in this session only comes when things on GitLab.com tend not to be performing well. So no questions indicates little interest and no attention to the fact that things are going well for the most part.
So I just put a question in real quick.
Go ahead, John.
For those that are not as aware or as familiar with what SRE is, can you cover kind of what areas you do cover? I think it'd be helpful. Not everyone understands your role, and it's a very important one, but we want to understand it. There's so many different moving parts at GitLab, so it's helpful.
Absolutely. First, since we're live streaming, let me introduce myself. I'm Anthony Sandoval. I'm an engineering manager for SRE. There are 3 SRE teams in the infrastructure department right now, and we have a number of them on the call. So once I'm done talking, I'll invite anyone to elaborate on what the day-to-day function of the role is. But as far as scope of responsibilities at GitLab, we are the first line of defense for triaging alerts. We're also responsible for setting up those alerts and the observability systems that monitor GitLab.com, the application. That's all user-facing aspects, as well as all the back-end operational and maintenance tasks. For example, an alert that says users are experiencing an elevated error rate, 500 is being returned. Or an alert that says, hey, we've got a cert expiring for a particular property at our domain 30 days from now, again, 2 weeks from now, hey, 7 days, hurry up, guys, that kind of operational responsibility. Because we're in the infrastructure department, we are also designers and orchestrators of the platform that GitLab.com runs on. This means all compute resources, database, file systems, and the like in GCP and any of the other cloud providers that we currently utilize. So we work in DevOps fashion in a capacity that interacts with development, as well as quality and other areas of the business to support all of our targets, uptime, SLAs, SLOs, etc., for GitLab.com and its customers. So, and then from there, I will let anybody talk about the day-to-day of the role. I see a number of you here, so anyone who wants to volunteer.
Just want to say thanks. Thanks for doing that.
So I'm Matt Smiley, and I'm one of the SREs. I spend a good bit of time on root cause analysis. So recent interesting tidbits are looking into the root cause for our Patroni failovers, which cause brief disruptions to the writability of our Postgres database, as well as recently Craig Miskell and I have been digging into some fascinating evidence that he discovered where many of our GCP instances will reboot themselves spontaneously, and it turns out that that's probably a problem with GCP's infrastructure. So we're working with GCP support right now to dig further into that, but those are some interesting tidbits I thought to share.
All right, I had those links handy, so I took both of those issues, if anyone wants to dig deeper, and I added them to the doc.
Hi, this is William on mobile, and I'm curious what the plan is in order to start adopting GitLab capabilities for alerting, incident management, monitoring, the ones that are built into GitLab. What's the plan for adoption, and at what stage are we at on that plan? What are the next steps?
Thanks, William. So we're in constant communication, or I should at least say regular communication, with a number of the product managers in the monitor category. The most recent integration, and Ben, coach, is on the call, he could talk about this in detail if I miss anything, has been
I can talk about this if you want.
Take it, go for it. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, so I'm Ben. I am formerly on the monitor stage, and so was part of the design of building these monitoring features that we've been adding to the GitLab product. And I joined the SRE team back in July and have been working on kind of some of that plan as to how do we use the features that we're building as part of the monitor stage. And so I have a background in monitoring itself, and I have been spending most of my time increasing the observability tools that we're using in GitLab.com. And actually, as part of the monitor stage, I spent quite a lot of time working with the SREs to instrument the product. And part of the interesting thing here is that the instrumentation that we do for GitLab.com is actually fairly advanced and quite a bit further advanced than what the product is capable of doing. But at the same time, there are things that we're trying to do. For example, we just recently turned on and have started testing, and it's very early stages, so I don't have any real results to share here, but we're starting to test the incident management features of GitLab. So we're starting to experiment with taking some of the alerts that would normally go to a pager and interrupt somebody's work and sending those to the issues, so that instead of interrupting somebody's day, we can do an async alert. So that, say, a good example of this is some of our SSL certificates, they come to renew. You know, people have probably seen expired certificates on a website before. We have monitoring of this to make sure that we don't ever get into the situation where we are serving an expired certificate. Currently, we page an engineer if a certificate is not automated or the automation has failed and we're not automatically renewing these certificates. And instead of paging the engineer a week ahead of time, we're now going to open a ticket and only page the engineer if it comes down to like the last day of renewal.
Thanks, Ben. I can add a little bit more in context. Like you mentioned, it's a very complicated and advanced set of features that we're using that are part of our monitoring suite: Grafana, Prometheus, Elk Stack, and all the others. We're acting more like a consultancy back to the business and the product managers who are integrating our recommendations into the features that are being built. We're very cautious, and with a lot of emphasis on dog fooding, we're committed to doing this, but we're very cautious to using GitLab to monitor GitLab. We want to be able to for certain areas that are less critical to business continuity, but when GitLab goes down, we can't use GitLab to monitor GitLab. So we take some of the responsibility of this and we offload it to another installation, which we affectionately call the ops instance, which runs on a private domain. And then we are also taking other properties, subdomains of GitLab.com, and selecting them as first candidates to work with some of the features for monitoring. Example might be design.gitlab.com or license.gitlab.com. Some of these other subdomains that aren't part of the GitLab code base and run separately on their own infrastructure. So we're, with these candidates, these first candidates, definitely committed to dogfooding. We'll be doing more with the product. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the doc. Anyone else on the call who has something they'd like to add, who may be mobile, unable to type? Okay.
Oh,
Oh, no, go ahead, please, please, please.
sorry, technical. Can y'all hear me?
All
now?
right, Stephen.
Sorry,
Yes.
trouble with the headset. I know the registry, I believe, was moved to Kubernetes successfully, maybe a month or so, or over the past month. Was curious about moving other parts of .com into Kubernetes infrastructure.
So we do have OKRs now for the department to move pieces to Kubernetes, and there's an epic, I'll try to find it, paste it into the doc, that is requesting for candidates to be moved over. Our search is mainly focused on modular components of the stack that we can move out. Sidekick is a good example. Scarbeck, you're on the call and you led this charge. If you want to interrupt me and add anything,
Certainly.
do.
As you
right.
find that epic, you will find that we have, in this moment in time, made a decision to move forward with looking for a specific queue inside of Sidekick and push that into Kubernetes. We want to specifically target a specific queue. That way we are rolling in Sidekick in a very controlled fashion. We don't want to cause any more incidences of causing issues with Redis or Postgres or anything. So I think slowly handling a specific queue would be beneficial for us. The other thing we are targeting is the use of Camo Proxy. This was a recent addition to our infrastructure, and there's no reason why it can't run inside of Kubernetes. So this will be one of the other things that will be assisting in the migration as well.
Great, thanks for that.
All right, the original issue and then both epics for Sidekick and Camel Proxy are in the doc now. Good examples, these are stateless services as well. Anything with persistent storage becomes more difficult and is far less mature in the Kubernetes space. But we do have a design doc and discussion ongoing about Postgres potentially in the future, which is very exciting, but it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more before we make an ultimate decision. And will be tested thoroughly.
Press?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, same comments. Doc is empty. I'll pause for 30 seconds and then we will adjourn. There's nothing else.
Hey, this is William again. That was tremendous information about the state of using GitLab and using options. Grafana, I know that our team, like you're saying, and our customers, is there any way that the SRE team is exposing some of our best practices, especially with, say, Grafana dashboards to our customer base? Or if not, maybe kick that up.
All right, I'm going to take the bits and pieces that I caught. You were a little garbled and we got that byte stream fast forward. But I think the question was around Grafana and dashboard best practices as we can present to customers as ways to also monitor, assuming they're self-managed installations. We do publicly make, we make all of our dashboards publicly available at dashboards.gitlab.com. So we often have users who are experiencing their own issues with website, sometimes even site slowdowns or abnormalities in the graphs that they find on their own. So we have all the dashboards available. We have a repository that saves state of JSON, as well as some JSON.NET templates that we use to build dashboards in, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is in the Runbooks repository. I can link to that in the doc as well later. And we are open to merge requests. So it's an awesome example of our value of transparency. As far as best practices go for self-managed, I'm not sure, but I think if there's a relationship that can be developed between technical account managers or solution architects, whatnot, we're certainly open to building that relationship and bettering that experience for our self-managed customers. I see a question from Chester.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony. Yeah. So my question is, what is the most challenging aspect of achieving 99.9, and up SLAs on .com, and just kind of give an overview of some of the challenges that you all faced?
I'll give this question to any of the SREs out there, because I think it'd be nice to get some unique perspective, subjective answers to this, because it's going to be different for different members of our team. And if no one else answers, then I'll give my own thoughts. So I think there are two things to consider. One of the most challenging aspects is an accurate measurement of our SLAs. Writing SLAs, figuring out where our KPIs translate into what could be a customer-facing metric is something that we're still working on and developing internally. The second is getting a good understanding of the usage patterns and the individual use cases of our customers. We have more enterprise customers migrating to GitLab.com. We have developers who have their own personal projects. We have abusers who sometimes get on GitLab and with intent to take advantage of free resources in the cloud, compute resources, doing things that we may not immediately see or be able to predict. And each of these presents its unique and its own difficulty for mitigating because of application architecture, shared resources, lack of isolation sometimes between projects and accounts, not from a logical perspective, but from the utilization of compute resources. So sometimes it's bad actors. Oftentimes it's good actors doing things that we hadn't predicted as something they would want to do on GitLab.com.
Wow, Anthony, those are fantastic answers. Way better than the ones I had.
You got to add something now, Matt.
All right, I'll add something. I was going to say two things. One was workload profiling, which you just described in much more clear detail, and two was I think so specifically the variety of workloads that we have to cater to. But apart from that, I guess the only thing I can add to your list is we have several single points of failure in our infrastructure right now, and correcting for that requires significant effort on an architectural level. I'm new. I'm only 4 months into my tenure at GitLab, but I don't yet see a lot of opportunity to correct for that. I think right now we're just mitigating the fact that we have a few single points of failure. but I'm hopeful that we will address that in the coming future. Beyond that, I think the ability to proactively, rather than reactively, respond to known points that threaten that 3.9's uptime would be absolutely fantastic if we could get to the phase of being proactive instead of reactive. And there are absolutely definite steps that we can take to move in that direction if we have the appetite and the staffing for it. And I think probably we do have both.
Yeah, so I'm Hendrik, also an SRE. So one thing I want to add is that we also have external dependencies. We are hosted with Google Cloud, for example, so that if there is a failure on their end, we're also impacted by it. As an example, there are the recent reboots of Gitly servers, which are also a single point of failure in the repositories that they host. And that is stuff that we cannot really proactively react on, proactively do something about, except improving our high availability, which is an ongoing project right now to make sure that all Git repositories are hosted highly available. And yeah, that's something I wanted to add.
I'd like to tack on to that as a result of those Gitly servers rebooting, we started adding instrumentation to detect server reboots and discovered that we had other servers in the fleet that were also being affected. So that's a good point to the resilience of our fleet, that we were having brief outages on individual instances that are not worth monitoring individually because they're just cattle. That our infrastructure is resilient enough that it did not impact our overall availability to have 30, 60 seconds of outage on an individual instance of one of like 30, 40 nodes.
And another thing that also is tied into the measurement of how exactly our SLAs are affected is that an alert doesn't have to be impacting every user. As a recent example, there are multiple ways how, for example, the Docker registry can create an alert that is just impacted by a single user or a single group. Because there is a possibility of an image getting corrupted while being pushed, and that will then cause errors on our side that presumably can be detected, but we haven't built any information around that yet. But that will trigger an alert, and it does not affect every user. It just affects the users that are accessing that image at that point in time. So that is also something that we might need to have a differentiated view on how exactly an alert or a presumed impact is actually impacting the users in a broad sense.
Thank you, Andrew and Matt. We made great strides. Andrew's not on the call. He went on vacation, but Andrew Newdigate has done a significant amount of work for SLO-based alerting. He gave a presentation on this at Monitorama in Portland. So I linked to that video in the doc as well. It's a good watch. It's humorous as well.
Thanks for the great answers. Appreciate it.
All right, we are bumping up on a 2-minute mark to the end of the meeting, so I will only allow for 10 seconds of awkward silence this time. All right, thank you everyone for the great questions. Thank you to all the SREs on the call. And I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day, everyone.